What's up everyone, Pierre here from Into Fly Fishing, and this is our first video in our 5-part series on how to catch giant trevally on fly. I've been privileged enough to have guided and fished for these incredible fish all over the world and for quite some time, and in this specific video I thought I would share with you all the gear that you need to catch GTs on fly. Well, giant trevally aren't always as predictable as other fish species, let's say like trout for instance, where you know if you fish the seam between the fast and the slow current or drift the fly past a specific rock or something like that, the fish will probably eat. No, these fish are a little bit more intelligent and temperamental. That's what makes them so much more fun to catch. Right before we dive into the rest of the video, I would personally like to take the time and thank the guys over at Snowbee Fly Fishing who really made this whole trip to the Maldives possible. We fished a bunch of their rods, like this Snowbee Prestige GXS 10 weight rod. It really performed well. I would also like to thank the guys over at Diamond River Outfitters, who are great friends of mine, who just started an operation in the Maldives. Thank you so much for hosting us and making it a memorable trip. If you guys are interested in traveling to the Maldives, following in our footsteps and just go and catch these amazing fish, be sure to check them out. We'll leave a link in the description down below. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you probably know what giant trevally are. But if you don't, giant trevally, or their scientific name, Currunx ignobilis, is the largest trevally species in the world. They inhabit tropical waters of the Indian Ocean and the western part of the Pacific. Giant trevally in excess of 50 kilograms is not an uncommon catch for spin fishermen, and they can attain sizes of up to 180 pounds or about 80 kilograms. This is just a badass predatory fish that eats everything in its path, from crabs to squid to baitfish. So what makes GTs so special to catch on fly? Giant trevally have become one of the icons of saltwater fishing, right up there with tarpon, permit and bonefish. Apart from the fact that they're amazingly beautiful and that you have to travel to these far off places that are very remote to go and target them, I think the two biggest reasons why they're so popular is, first off, the way they eat the fly and the aggression that they put into the eat, and also the incredible raw power. If you see a GT right behind your fly and it opens its mouth and it hits it and it annihilates your fly and you go tight with it, that image right there will keep replaying in your mind for years to come. I think that the speed and the aggression that these fish display when they take your fly is what makes anglers come back year after year. Once you hook into a decent specimen, you'll soon realize you're not completely in control. It's a very humbling experience to stand with a 12 weight, just such a powerful rod with a 120 pound leader, and you're just getting the hiding of your life. GTs are dirty fighters and they play according to jail rules. And if you're lucky enough to catch one in your life, you'll know what I mean when I say they are incredibly special fish. Before attempting to target these fish, it's important to have the right gear. I cannot emphasize this enough. Every single part of gear that you use to target these fish needs to be the best that you can afford, and it needs to be maintained meticulously. If there's any weak link from your rod to the fly, anything in between, the fish places so much pressure on gear, they will find the weak spot, guaranteed. Now first off, let's start with the rod. I only recommend 12 weights or more for giant trevally. 13 and 14 weights, not really, because they don't allow you to cast as easily, but 12 weights, anything less will get you into trouble. We were fortunate enough to catch a couple of them on this, the Snowbee Prestige GXS 10 weight, and on fish sub 85 or 80 centimeters, that's perfectly fine. But if you hook into a decent fish, 90 centimeters and plus, you will run into issues. Get a 12 weight from a reputable manufacturer with a decent after sales service program. These trips generally are hard on gear, and there's a good chance that you'll have to replace a section or more of a rod somewhere in the rod's lifetime. For instance, both the rods that I took to the Maldives are in for repairs. Also, make sure that you always take a spare 12 weight rod with you on your trip. Now onto the reel. On large fish, it's the reel's drag that places the most pressure on the fish. Yes, you also grip it when you sort of feel that the fish is giving up. You can place more pressure with your palm, but it's generally the drag that you are using to turn and win over that fish. So the drag needs to be very smooth, and most importantly, it needs to have a lot of power. Make sure of this before you buy a reel for Giant Trevally. If you hook a GT in the surf or around coral heads, you need to stop it as soon as possible. If you intend to fish on white sand flats, you can open the drag a little bit more so that they can run and sort of blow off their steam before you turn them. In terms of drag type or drag material, I don't want to say that cork like the Shilton has is better than a seal drag, let's say for instance than a Mako, or that a seal drag is better than cork. I wouldn't say anything like that, but what I want you to note is it needs to be the best quality that you can afford, especially when you buy a seal drag. I once guided a client in the Seychelles and they used a mid-priced 12-weight reel. I'm not going to say the brand because I don't want to offend anyone, but they hooked into a really nice GT on the flats. What happened is the fish started running and the client started turning the drag on, thus applying more pressure, which is great. And then suddenly we saw a lot of smoke coming from the reel. About 2 or 3 seconds later, the spool popped off and fly line was going everywhere, and the fly line wrapped around the rod, and the rest is history. Fly line broke, reel broke, and the dream fish lost. Don't want this to happen to you, especially if you're spending so much money and time to go to a destination and catch your Giant Trevally of your life. Make sure that you buy the best reel you can afford. Although that most big 12-weight reels have great backing capacity, I wouldn't say this is a deal maker or a breaker. If you can fit from 200 to 250 yards of 80-pound backing on your reel, that's more than sufficient. If you hook into 120 centimeter GT and that fish peels off 120 yards of backing, you've lost it. You've lost the fish. The fight's over. There's no real need to have 300 or 400 or 500 yards of backing and say this is a better reel because of its backing capacity. The primary characteristics of a good Giant Trevally reel is it must be durable, incredibly durable, because you'll put it down into the sand, wash it with salt water throughout the day, it gets hammered on the boat, so it needs to be durable, and has an incredible drag. Some of the best GT reels out there is firstly the Mako 9600B. This is really an expensive reel, but it's really, really good. Shilton has 2 reels, the SR12 and this, the SL7. The Hardy Fortuna is incredible. The new Nautilus GTX is incredible. The Able SDS 1112 is a great reel. So anything in that sort of caliber, just test the drag and make sure that it almost locks, that you can't really drag if you apply force on it. Now, we already touched on the backing earlier, but I want to cover that in a little bit more detail. It's a relatively simple choice. I just use standard casting braid like Power Pro or Berkeley in 80 pounds. Nothing less than 80 pounds will do. It's not that you necessarily will pull 80 pounds or put 80 pounds of pressure on that fish. There's no chance that you can do that with a fly rod, but it just gives you that peace of mind that if coral nicks a strand here or there, you still have a lot of power to stop that fish. You can also use Cortland's hollow core 80-pound braid, which is an excellent braid, especially if you want to splice or attach the fly line directly to your backing without having a big knot. The fly line industry has really come a long way to develop fly lines specifically for Giant Trevally. Now, in the past, and like here, you would have to make do with a tarpon taper, which are generally okay to deliver relatively large flies, but the core is the problem. The core strength isn't as strong as the new modern Giant Trevally lines. These days, most top manufacturers or fly line manufacturers produce a Giant Trevally specific line with up-rated cores, like a 100-pound core in the Scientific Anglers line, and with tapers that are specifically designed to deliver large flies. All of these lines are generally floating fly lines because you are targeting these fish in flats environments or relatively shallow water. You'll also see that some of the fly lines, even though they're modern, they don't come with welded loops, and that's done as such for a very good reason. Welded loops don't really stand the pressure that Giant Trevally places on them, so we cut off the welded loops and we make a better knot. So don't choose a fly line over another one because it has welded loops or not. Now to the leader. In most cases, you'll fish fluorocarbon or monofilament between 100 pounds and 150 pounds. This is actually 80 pound, which is a great option if you're fishing on white sand flats. 80 pound fluorocarbon is a great option for that because you have a slightly thinner diameter, and because you're fishing on white sand flats, you can allow the fish to run a little bit further, but you must just keep it in mind, especially when you're trying to turn the fish. The abrasion, especially after a long fight, will definitely make 80 pound monofilament or fluorocarbon break. So what you do is, as soon as the fish has run and it's sort of turned, then you can apply more pressure. And if it's turned towards you, then you can apply a lot of pressure. Just keep it in mind when you're fighting the fish. The overall length of the leader is about a rod length, so 9 foot. Don't need to have anything in excess of that. It also makes it harder if you need to land the Giant Trevally yourself, because to get that big knot between the fly line and the leader, if you have to get that through your rod's tip, it can break your rod's tip. So just keep that in mind. 9 foot is more than enough. And another thing about the leader is that you need to replace the leader after every fish caught. Just run your hand over the leader, and if you feel any sort of abrasion or cuts, replace that leader. I promise you, I've lost countless fish because I was actually lazy to replace it. I don't want you to suffer the same fate. Now you know exactly what gear you need to catch GTs on fly. If you have any specific questions on a specific piece of gear, please leave the questions in the comment section down below, and I'll do my utmost best to get back to you with the best information that I can get. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications, then we can keep you in the loop of the rest of the videos that we're releasing in this great little series. Until next time, cheers.